Hello everyone, thank you for joining. Today we're going to talk about license monitoring, why it's important, the benefits it has to you, and how you can go about improving this. I'm joined today with my colleague Jeremy Vesey, who is one of our IT product specialists who has a lot of experience in this area. Jeremy and I will give a brief introduction to ourselves before we kick off. My name is Craig Schoenborn. I'm a client success manager at Symmetry. I have BIM management experience in architecture. I support clients in the adoption of software and workflows, which can help in many ways, such as working smarter, more efficiently, and getting the most out of your investment. Jeremy, if you could give a brief introduction.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Craig. My name is Jeremy Vesey. I've worked at Symmetry now for around 25 years. I've been in the IT solutions team, so installing equipment, setting equipment up, firewall software for customers, also getting involved in a lot of licensing queries, questions, and deployment. So I've started to look at CQ Flexman. So today we're going to show you, have a conversation about the licensing software benefits of license monitoring the licenses.
Great, thank you. Please drop any questions into the chat section and we will look to address that at the end. There are a few things I want to talk about today. Broadly speaking, I want to cover these sort of topics such as the methods of license monitoring, where companies are losing money, our solution in CQ Flexman, how that fits Autodesk licensing, and tokens would be an example of that. Some examples from our clients and next steps. I guess one of the first things to ask, Jeremy, is why is licensing monitoring important?
So it's very important, really, because a lot of customers will purchase a lot of software and a lot of licenses. So, which is fine if you've got a certain amount of users and a certain amount of licenses. That's the normal way of purchasing those software licenses. But it's really trying to get the utilization of those licenses, which is very, very difficult. It's if I ask customers and do ask customers, who's using what software for how long, how many licenses are you using, a lot of the times they can't answer that because it's very difficult. There's no obvious way to do that. So it's you could be paying an awful lot of money for these subscriptions, Autodesk subscriptions, Adobe subscriptions, SketchUp. They can be very expensive, and they do get very expensive. So if we can try to monitor those licenses, monitor the usage to make sure that people are using the licenses, just to try and get those subscriptions as optimized and as lean as possible. We don't want to stop people from producing data, but we do not want to really be purchasing licenses for the sake of it, when actually we could potentially reduce those subscriptions and make some real good cost savings there.
No, that's great. And how do companies deal with licensing traditionally?
So not very well, to be honest. A lot of companies will have software licensing inventory tools, should I say, I suppose, to list out the software that's installed on the devices, which is good. That helps from a compliancy aspect. But it's all well and good having this software, 50 PCs, 50 AutoCAD AEC subscriptions installed on all of those 50 PCs. But it's trying to get the utilization of that. We won't know. So, some customers at the moment will go around and ask users, do you still use AutoCAD? Do you still use Revit? Do you still use Adobe? Do you still need Photoshop? Do you still need SketchUp? So, and some users, yes, I still need that, but, because they don't potentially want that license taken away. So it's very, very easy to do that. I've seen, people going around asking people, sending surveys out, sending Excel spreadsheets that this user needs this license, and then every year those licenses just get purchased. So there can be some real cost savings if you actually work out who needs these licenses, who's actually using these licenses, to try and make some savings on those subscriptions.
Yeah, I think that matches my experience pretty well. Traditionally, I used to basically either send out a survey or actually go from desk to desk asking people. But yeah, I think that's got built-in inefficiencies. People may only answer what they're using that week or that day, and they may also be afraid to lose software, so
Yeah.
they kind of say they use something when they might not, or even forget softwares that they are using. So yeah, I can see where the inefficiencies are there for sure.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
our solution, CQ Flexman, seems to help in all those areas. Could you give a summary of what CQ Flexman is?
Yeah, sure. So CQ Flexman was originally created to monitor network licenses. So a lot of customers potentially on this webinar would have had Autodesk licenses on a network server. So you may purchase 50 network licenses. And obviously the software gets installed on the PCs. People open up the software, they get a license, they say close the software down, and it sends that license back to the license server. So very, very well optimized in terms of that. And when you look at the amount of licenses that you've got, CQ Flexmon would poll those license servers. It would communicate with those license servers on a regular basis, normally every 5 to 10 minutes, and get the information and send it back to the database. So we then list those users and the licenses, how many licenses people have used, how long they've used it. And then it will give you a really, really good picture across a period of time to work out how many licenses you really need. So that's where CQ Flexmon started, with monitoring network licenses. And then customers asked us about, how can I monitor AutoCAD LT, for instance? So AutoCAD LT has never been a network license product. So we have to find a different way. So every user, when they start to double click on a shortcut on their desktop, for instance, that runs something called an executable file. So we can then monitor that. So we can monitor the use of executable files. So that's how we monitored AutoCAD LT, and then that opens it up to other software, not just Autodesk. So we currently monitor still network license servers, and we've increased that. So we monitor Sentinel HASP, Sentinel RMS, CodeMeter, Zoo, different license technologies, because Autodesk use FlexLM as their network license, but other vendors also use FlexLM. So we still monitor that, but we also monitor the use of those executable files on the desktops and the laptops. So it opens it up to all other software. So they're the two different types of sort of the way we monitor, from a network license manager, or actually from the endpoints, the desktops and the laptops. We can spot that software being opened up and closed down to give you very, very similar statistics as if it was a network license manager product.
I see. Yeah, I think that makes sense for me in terms of monitoring very much specifics. One of the examples I've got that comes up a lot when I was looking at the benefits of buying, say, a full suite of software like an Adobe suite, as an example, opposed to a standalone application within there, like, say, Photoshop. Does CQ Flex support that sort of usage?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. So we would monitor that on the executable basis. So a lot of customers may have the full suite. So they'll have Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, Adobe Pro, for instance. So we monitor, we list all of the executable files that they have. So Photoshop.exe is an executable file for Photoshop. And we monitor that. So we will see those programs start up. We will also show you the versions. So it won't just be that a user has opened up Photoshop for 4 hours on a Monday. We'll actually diagnose that data, analyze that data, work out that it's actually Adobe Photoshop 2020 or 2021, which is really useful also, not just about the monitoring of the start times, the end times, and give you an overall picture. It will actually help you work out that people are still using an older version of the software. So we analyze where the executable file has come from the PC, what directory it's been installed in. So it's utilization of that software, but also what versions of that software, because, you know, Revit specifically, you can get really into different versions, and you want to make sure that people are using Revit 2021 on a whole project, for instance. So it's very, very handy to see some older versions still in use, and get IT to then take that software up, upgrade that software to the latest version of Adobe or AutoCAD or Revit, for instance. But because we monitor it via an executable, Adobe, Autodesk, any software that gets installed on a desktop or a laptop, it's open for us to be able to monitor.
That sounds like a lot of granular data, and I think we're going to touch on that a little bit later on sort of the reports you're able to generate.
Yeah.
As an Autodesk partner, our clients mostly using Autodesk licensing. Could you tell me some of the ways that our clients have saved money in this regard, including Autodesk Flex?
Yeah, sure. So a lot of customers have been, like I mentioned before, on network licenses. So you have a certain amount of network licenses. So what we do is we use CQ Flexman to monitor those network licenses for a period of time. It could be, a couple of weeks, could be a couple of months, 6 months, could be a year even. So we've got a real lot of data. And the CQ Flexman team can then assist those customers with actually looking at that data. So it's great to have all this data, but we need to be able to look and analyze that data to give you some numbers. So the CQ Flexman team can help the customers take that data, have a look at the database, and actually analyze the data to work out how many licenses we think. Because with the new Flex model of tokens, Flex tokens that Autodesk have brought out, that's very good for infrequent users of the software. So we will spot heavy users of the network licenses. They're using it day in, day out. So you wouldn't want to put them on Flex tokens because there's a cutoff sort of point of Flex tokens, really. If you're using it more than 7 or 8 times a month, you may be beneficial to go to an AEC collection user assigned license. But we will spot those users because we've picked up that they've only used it very infrequently. It can sometimes be a combination of going to that user. What are you opening up AutoCAD for? What are you opening up Revit for? And actually, it turns out they only need a viewer. So we can uninstall the software, take off the license, and actually just put a viewer on there. If they do still open up that software and still need to redline or modify that drawing or Revit model very slightly, but only do it 3 times a month, Flex tokens are perfect. So the cost savings can really come in from looking at that network license data, or even the user assigned licenses. When the subscriptions start to come up for renewal, we will present back to the customer a report to say, we've seen you have 50 network licenses. We actually think you need to just renew 25 licenses, but actually have a pot of 5,000 tokens for the very infrequent users. So then we continue to monitor with CQ Flexman the usage and adjust the licenses. So some Flex token users may have to go to an AEC license, and on the flip side, some AEC licenses may not be using it as much, so they can actually go down to Flex tokens. So there can be some considerable savings when we monitor the software and the subscriptions come up for renewal.
I see. Yeah, I think that this can vary a lot from client to client, it seems, and basically there'll be just savings to make because you got better informed decisions going forward.
Exactly.
Exactly. The better data for better decisions. I had a brief look at one of our CQ Flexman clients, some data that was produced from them. And so I was looking specifically at Revit users, all right, and what I could see on some of them that people were using the software for, say, less than 1 hour a week. So for me, if I'm, with my experience, I look at that and I'd go, well, this is basically using it as a viewer. There's no real input that person would do in an hour. Because if they did, they'd need more setup time and so on. So I could see that as a direct gain over there that they could make and turn those either into a viewer only employees, or make sure that they open only viewer only modes, you could say. So I can see having there. Another thing with my sort of background as a BIM manager, I need to facilitate training. And what I can see with this sort of data, how that could help me give better focused training, really. Because if I'm looking at what workflows we're trying to introduce into a company as an example, but then I can see monitoring data that either employees are opening an additional bit of software, or perhaps using a bit of software less than expected, I can then look at that data and go, okay, well, I need to either upskill, I need to train, or I need to refine my workflows in order to get rid of or streamline the process, really.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I can just see, again, data, and using that data again to see, well, what can we actually drop? Because I think a lot of companies have historic licenses that might not be used much at all, but they kind of, I remember it was useful once, so we'll just keep it. So yeah, I can see that benefits for sure. So could you go through what are some of the types of reports we're able to generate?
Yeah, we'll have a little look at that. So we can see, I'll go through some of the data. So this is some of the raw data that you see. So with CQ Flexman, you get a report client, and that can be installed on as many devices as you want in your organization. And this is the type of data. So for instance, we've looked at Autodesk data here for a quarter of a year, and it's going to give us some very, very useful information of who's started what application. We look at Active Directory, so we look at your users and we pull in their job titles, because sometimes the job titles can be quite key when you're looking at data. If you've got associates, directors, project managers, they might not be opening AutoCAD software very, very frequently because they're not producing the data in that sense. They're just looking at it. So this is the raw data. This is all in, we've got our own Excel engine within CQ Flexman, so you can copy and paste this data straight into Excel if you want to. This breaks the data down, so we actually break it down into very granular detail by sort of, we've seen the process start and stop at certain times, so we actually flag that for you. This comes back to like what you mentioned previously, just about older software still being in use. So we can still see in this diagram that 3 users are still using AutoCAD 2016 and 9 users, for instance, are using 2017. So you can just spot quickly via this graph that we've potentially got a compliancy issue there with Autodesk software, because unless you've got special dispensation from Autodesk to use the older software, that's still installed and it's still in use because we've seen these open. So it's very, very handy for us to see that. This chart will show us activity. So these are the very, very heavy users of Autodesk software. We've picked Autodesk software for a quarter. These are the users that are using it a lot. And at the bottom, that will very granular detail of how many people are using it or not using the software. So the bottom users of these types of graph would be an ideal candidate for flex tokens dependent on their usage. This one sort of flips the data on its head. So this user here has used Autodesk software twice in a period of time, which was the quarter 2021, but they've had 50 inactivity days. So again, very easy to spot a potential there for flex tokens. Do they need a whole AEC collection license assigned to them for a whole year? Probably not, based on their usage statistics. This is where we're looking at a network license, and customers still have network licenses. So this is the type of data that we can see. We're hitting our network license limit of 100% of licenses in use across these periods of time. So, but we can also see that their network licenses are still 20–25% in use on a Saturday and a Sunday. Now that could be people are working, could be that people have borrowed licenses from the network license server. It could be that they've left their PCs on within AutoCAD and Revit, and the inactivity timeout has not been set on the FlexLM server, so it doesn't reclaim the license back. So the issue you've got there is 25% of the licenses are in use when potentially no one's working. So the borrow period can be changed on the FlexLM server, and the license inactivity timeout can be set. And this is a graph. Yeah, go on.
So that basically is they potentially just using a license completely without actually doing any work with it. So it's open.
Correct.
And that would also just then throw off the data when you're looking at your end number usage, right? So we can help clients get that refreshed and take those licenses back and get even more accurate data, I guess.
Yeah, exactly that. Because you would see, if someone consumed a license, opened up AutoCAD and borrowed the license for 6 months, it would drop your license count down by 1. If 10 people done that, that's 10 licenses that have been taken off the network license server for other users to use. They could then go on holiday for a month, but actually the license is locked on their PC if they used a network license server. So it's really just showing that there's a big empty space, you know, here. We want to get this down as close to 0 as possible. So therefore the top line, you know, these users potentially are not using licenses, is raising this bar, so you're hitting these peaks. If these licenses weren't in use, you probably wouldn't hit that peak of 93 licenses there.
Yeah.
So this is another report of just showing basic usage of data. So we can start to see that across that period of time, AutoCAD is still very, very a heavily used product. And Revit. So some people think Revit's their main product, but AutoCAD is still very, very in use. This one here will break it down into a user. So we started to see AutoCAD usage as well as Adobe usage and SketchUp usage. So that user across the period of time that we've selected, we can get a good idea across that time that they've used AutoCAD, Revit, occasionally InDesign, Acrobat, Illustrator. So, you know, they're using multiple products out of the suite. This user here is obviously using AutoCAD a lot and Adobe, but that could be where they're leaving the PC on. This chart sort of confirms it, because we can start to see that this user has opened up AutoCAD and used it for 18 hours that day, and then constantly 24 hours. So that, I suspect, they're probably not working for 24 hours, but it's probably just using that license, and they've left that license open, left that license on the PC, which is a big issue if you start to use Flex tokens, because if you was to assign Flex tokens to this user, every 24-hour period, they would be consuming 7 tokens potentially for AutoCAD. So it would really chew through those tokens. So although the usage could be that you think the user should need AutoCAD on a Flex token usage, if they don't shut down their PC, don't shut down their software, they could be a high consumer of Flex tokens, but not necessarily based on usage. But if you didn't have CQ Flexman, you wouldn't be able to see that. So this just generates, you know, this user, I would say we're going to have to give them an AEC collection license, because they would be consuming too many Flex tokens. So very easy to spot that type of information there.
So would this also help, can CQ Flexman help with non-compliance?
Yes, it can. So we've got a SAM module. So we've specifically created a module to assist customers with compliance issues. And this software, this SAM module, works for Autodesk software. So we've got an agent that sits on your endpoints, your desktops and your laptops, and it runs a scan. So it will run a scan very much similar to an inventory tool, PDQ, SCCM, a lot of these technologies that customers use, IT departments use, have an inventory tool. But we actually break it down into a bit more granular detail. We will show serial number of the Autodesk software, the license type, whether it's a network license type or whether it's a user assigned license type. So we'll show a lot of information, you know, which will help the customer just have a good idea of what's going on the PCs in terms of Autodesk software. The SAM module is specifically and only for Autodesk software, but it really helps just to iron out and have a look and just make sure that you can be as compliant as possible.
So I can see that there's a lot of data that gets generated from CQ Flexman, and a lot of granular data. So do we help customers interpret that data?
Yeah, we do. So that's that license optimization report. So there's multiple ways that we can sort of help the customers. So, you know, some customers, a lot of the data is in an SQL database. Okay, so that's a well-known SQL database, and a lot of our reports get generated, and they can get automatically generated. So they can get automatically generated every month. Some customers will use and have a report generated on the 1st of every month for the previous month of Autodesk usage or Adobe usage or SketchUp, Inkscape, any particular software they want. And you can get that a variety of ways. You could have that sent to a network share on your server. So you just go to the drive mapping on the 1st of every month that you've got, and there's a report there. you could have it upload it to an FTP site so multiple people could see that. We can also configure SMTP settings, so mailbox settings and mail settings. So we can generate some reports and get those sent directly to the user. So on the 1st of every month, they have a report generated in their mailbox. So that's what you can do straight away. Now you can also opt for us to have a couple of meetings across the year, of your subscription of CQ Flexman, just to come onto the system and just interpret and help you interpret the data. And it depends on, if you're very well versed in Excel, for instance, you could take a lot of the data and produce a lot of the graphs and analytical data yourself. Some customers take the data into Power BI. Some customers take the data into Airtable, a variety of different technologies to help customers, analyze that data. But one of the optional services is the CQ Flexman team can actually analyze that data, take a copy of your database and produce that report and present it back to you with cost savings. So we'll give you a lot of different options. So it's been really, really useful for customers that have gone from network licenses to user assigned to get an idea. And we will come back and present back to the customers different options. Option 1, stay as you are, renew your FlexLM license server if you can, and it's going to be this cost. The next one will be, we think you need to drop your network licenses down by 25%, but purchase 5,000 Flex tokens, and we'll break that down into cost, because there's a lot of costs associated with Autodesk licenses, specifically with how they've been upgraded over the years. Have they gone from M2S, different subscriptions? Are they a full price retail license? So we'll help the customer. We think you need to drop your full price licenses because they're very, very costly. We think you need to renew your multi-user to subscription licenses because they're the cheaper licenses. So that's the way that we'll actually do it. Rather than just give you, we think you need to purchase 25 licenses of Flex tokens, we'll break it down and give you some cost savings of how we think that's going to work for you in the future.
Yeah, I can see so many ways clients can benefit from this, really. I think as soon as you start going into multi-license usage, CQ Flexman will just be valuable to you straight off the bat, really. So how easy is this to set up?
Yeah, it's very straightforward. So there's a couple of different options. So depends on your variety, depends on your infrastructure as well in the organization. So some customers have a virtual infrastructure with virtual servers. The IT team, we liaise with the IT team. It's not just a piece of software that we give you the software download and a user guide and let you loose with it. We'll actually come onto the system, work with IT to work out where the best place to put it. Some customers in their organizations will have a server dedicated to CQ Flexman. Like I said, it runs an SQL database. You can have SQL Express, which is a free version, so it doesn't need a costly SQL and additional software. So, we can really help with that. We can also host the database for you as well, and the configuration. So it's really trying to get the best way for the customers, to help them. So the way that we're working now, a lot of customers were in the office all of the time. So if they were in the office all of the time, they might have it on premise, on their, in their infrastructure, in their office, on a server, in their office, working all the time. But now a lot of people work from home. A lot of people have changed the way they work. So if all of your data was not, some customers VPN and access data into their office, that's where their data is. If they don't do that, we want to be able to get all of the data from the endpoints into the database so we can report on it. So that's why some customers have chosen for us to host their database for them. So a lot of the desktops and the laptops, as long as they've got an internet connection, it would send the information directly to our cloud server, but your customer database. And so that's another way of working, but it can sit on a workstation. Some customers haven't got a very large infrastructure in terms of servers and networking. So It can sit. We've got some customers that have got a spare workstation up and running, and we've installed CQ Flexman on that. Now, a lot of the times it takes potentially an hour to an hour and a half for us to install CQ Flexman, get it set up. But we also follow that up with hours, consultancy hours that are included in the installation cost for us to just check in with you every couple of weeks to make sure that it's picking up the data, to make sure that you can get the reports out of the system. If you can't get the reports, we'll help you generate the reports, and we'll help you generate any new templates that you want. So, to try and work that data out. So yeah, it's quite straightforward, and we always go through that, with the customer before the order or during the order process, really, just to work out how many vendors you want to monitor, how many users have you got, what modules do you want, and actually produce that and work with IT to get it set up and installed correctly.
We've got a lot of clients already because we've been using this for a while. Do you have any client-specific examples of benefits that they've had?
Yeah, so like I said, there's been a big move from obviously Autodesk to move from network licenses to user assigned. So we've had a lot of users using CQ Flexman to do that. And in some situations, we've seen 70 to 80,000 pounds worth of savings from going from network licenses to user assigned licenses. And obviously each customer is going to be unique in that sense, but the more subscriptions you've got, the more paid subscriptions you've got of this software, the bigger the potential savings there, and a lot of the time, you don't know your usage until you start to monitor it. So it's, if people are using, if you've got 50 licenses and we spot that people are using 50 licenses, then you can confirm that's exactly the amount of licenses you need. If we look at that data and we can save you potentially 10 licenses of AEC collection and complement it with some flex tokens you can make some significant savings of money, of monitoring those licenses and really getting the optimization and licensing and subscriptions as lean as possible, really.
Great. So how would interested parties get started? Where could they go, or how to contact us?
So marketing, after this call, marketing will follow up with all of the users that have joined on the webinar. We've got a lot of information on our website, so a lot of different links. We've done some previous webinars, so it's really just marketing will get in contact and try to get some feedback from yourselves. And also really, that's where you can then book an appointment or even book a demo of the software, so we can just get you a bit more detail of exactly what you want to try to monitor, how many products. So that's the best way forward.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy. So what will happen next basically is just what Jeremy said, is marketing will be in touch for some feedback and potentially to book an appointment with Jeremy to discuss your needs further. But that pretty much wraps it up now for our webinar. Thank you for joining, everybody. I enjoyed speaking to Jeremy, and I hope you enjoyed it too. The recording will be provided next week, so look out for that. And I appreciate everybody joining. Thank you.
Thank you.